My friends, there's a strength that doesn't shout, a wisdom that doesn't need to explain itself, and there's a power, real power, in silence. Not everyone sees it, not everyone values it, but silence. Silence is where clarity is born. In a world obsessed with noise, with proving, with performing, with constantly showing up loud, it takes a different kind of courage to be still, to hold your peace, to watch and wait, to speak only when it's time and not just when you feel like it. See, people confuse silence with weakness. They think if you're quiet, you've got nothing to say. But sometimes silence says more than words ever could. It says, I don't need to prove anything. It says, I'm listening. It says, I'm paying attention. When you're silent, you're in control of your spirit, your emotions, your reactions. That's power. Because anybody can explode, but it takes discipline to pause. Anybody can talk, but not everybody can discern. Some of the greatest moves you'll ever make in life will happen in silence. Decisions formed in quiet corners. Convictions born out of stillness, because when the world gets quiet, God speaks louder. When you shut out the distractions, you can finally hear the voice that matters. Silence makes room for insight. It makes room for growth. It makes room for healing, and it makes room for instruction. Not every storm is meant to be fought with words. Some storms are won by waiting them out in faith. When life tries to pull you into drama, into conflict, into chaos, the most powerful thing you can do sometimes is nothing. Don't respond. Don't react. Let the silence be your answer. People don't know how to handle that kind of self-control. But that's how you stay anchored. That's how you keep your peace. That's how you stop letting other people's noise control your direction. Not every battle is yours. Some are distractions in disguise. There's a reason why the most focused people are often the quietest in the room. They're not absent, they're alert, they're not weak, they're calculating, they're not lost, they're listening. That's the power of silence. It sharpens your awareness. It makes you a better judge of people and situations. You stop falling for surface noise. You start picking up on the things most people miss, because silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. There will be times when life tests your character, when people try to drag you into their chaos. They'll misunderstand you, talk about you, challenge your peace, and the flesh will want to speak up, to argue, to clap back. But silence, when used with wisdom, is not surrender, it's elevation. It's choosing to preserve your energy for what actually matters. Not everything deserves a response, and maturity is learning to stay quiet, even when your ego is screaming for validation. Sometimes the greatest growth happens when you learn to sit with your own thoughts, without distractions, without needing to post about it, without needing someone to approve, just you and your conscience. That's where integrity is tested, that's where character is built, because it's easy to perform when eyes are watching, but who are you when no one's looking? That's where silence brings you face to face with the truth. It's uncomfortable, but it's real and it's necessary. Silence teaches discipline, it teaches listening, it teaches restraint, and in the spiritual sense it teaches surrender. Because when you stop talking long enough, you realize you're not in control. But you are responsible, responsible for how you respond, responsible for what you absorb, responsible for how you protect your peace, and peace is priceless. You can't buy it, but you can lose it fast if you're careless with your energy. Silence is not weakness, it's strategic strength. In a world that equates loudness with leadership and volume with value, we have forgotten the sacred art of restraint. We rush to fill every pause with our opinions, every space with our reactions, every moment with our noise. But silence, real, intentional silence, is not the absence of power, it's the control of it. It takes no strength to speak out of turn, to lash out in anger, to blurt out every thought. But it takes incredible discipline to hold your peace, to choose not to respond, to stand still while everything around you is demanding a reaction. There's a wisdom that comes from being slow to speak and quick to observe. Strategic silence isn't about being passive. It's about being precise. It's about knowing when to speak and when to listen, when to engage and when to step back. The strongest voices are often the quietest because they don't need to shout to be heard. They let the weight of their presence and the depth of their thoughts carry the message. They aren't reacting. They are calculating. They aren't panicking. They are preparing. When you understand the strength in silence, you stop letting the noise of the world provoke you into movements that don't align with your mission. You learn to hold your position when others are flailing. You resist the urge to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to prove your worth to those who have already made up their minds. That's not weakness. That's strategy. That's power, the power to say, I don't need to attend every argument I'm invited to. I don't need to respond to every insult. I don't need to speak just because I can. Real power lies in restraint. There are battles you only win by staying quiet. There are victories that come when you choose not to fight back the way the world expects. Sometimes silence is your shield. Sometimes it's your weapon. And sometimes it's your refuge. It's the space where you meet clarity, where you process pain, where you gather strength. People often fear silence because it forces them to sit with themselves, to confront their own thoughts, their doubts, their insecurities. But those who learn to master silence find themselves rising above the noise that consumes everyone else. Not everyone deserves access to your voice. Not every moment calls for commentary. Not every situation requires your response. Strategic silence is knowing the value of your energy and choosing to spend it wisely. It's understanding that presence speaks louder than words, that calmness communicates confidence, and that sometimes the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. There's power in looking someone in the eye and choosing peace over pride. Power in letting your fruit speak for you instead of trying to defend your name. Power in trusting that time will reveal what words never could. The loudest people in the room are often the most insecure. They cover their fear with noise. They mask their uncertainty with volume. But those who have truly walked through the fire, who have been tested, broken, and rebuilt, they don't need to prove themselves. Their silence speaks of survival, of wisdom earned through pain, of lessons learned in the dark. They've come to understand that the loudest voice isn't always the most accurate, and the quickest response isn't always the wisest. In silence we find clarity. We hear what's really being said beneath the noise. We notice what others miss. We discern motives. We see through facades, because silence sharpens perception. It makes space for thought, for prayer, for strategy. It allows us to hear what the Spirit is saying, not just what the crowd is shouting. It protects us from reacting out of emotion instead of conviction. It gives us time to align our words with our values, to ensure that when we do speak, it's with purpose and weight. Strategic silence is a form of discipline that guards your influence. Leaders who speak carelessly lose credibility. Voices that are always loud lose their impact. But the one who waits, who listens, who speaks at the right time, that's the voice people remember. That's the voice that shifts rooms. That's the voice that breaks through the noise, not because it was loud, but because it was true, and it was timely. Power lies in that discipline, in the decision to speak less but say more. To do less talking and more listening, to act with intention instead of impulse. That's strength, that's mastery, that's the power of silence. In stillness, clarity, and divine direction are revealed. In the quiet spaces of life, far from the distractions and demands, something sacred begins to stir. There's a wisdom that doesn't come from motion or momentum, but from sitting still long enough to hear what can't be heard in chaos. The world pushes for action, for immediate results, for constant movement. But there's a kind of revelation that only comes when everything stops. When the noise fades, the truth emerges. In silence, what's essential surfaces. In stillness, what's eternal becomes visible. That's where clarity is found, not in the rush, but in the wait. Too often we search for answers by doing more, chasing louder voices, adding to our schedules, piling on responsibilities, hoping the noise will drown out the confusion. But the soul doesn't respond to clutter, it responds to calm. It's in the moments of being still, of letting the mind rest and the heart settle, that a different voice speaks, a voice not rooted in fear or ego, but in peace. Clarity isn't born from chaos, it's birthed in order, and order starts with stillness. You don't gain direction by running, you find it by stopping, by pausing long enough to ask, to listen, to align. Stillness isn't passivity, it's intentional, it's purposeful. It's the refusal to rush into decisions based on pressure or emotion. It's the discipline to wait until your spirit catches up to your situation. It's the strength to say, I don't have to move just because others are moving. I don't have to speak just because there's silence. I don't have to act just because there's expectation. In stillness, you gain perspective. You start to see the bigger picture. You stop focusing on the noise and start tuning into the signal. That signal, quiet, steady, clear is where direction lies. Stillness doesn't always make sense to the world. People will call it indecision, weakness, hesitation. But what they can't see is the storm you're avoiding by staying anchored. What they don't understand is that direction without clarity leads to destruction. When you move too fast without knowing where you're going, you risk walking in circles. But when you wait until the path is revealed, you walk with confidence, you walk with peace, and you walk with power. Stillness brings that power, the power to move with certainty instead of confusion, the power to act on vision instead of fear. Clarity is expensive. It costs you comfort. It costs you distraction. It costs you the constant validation that comes from noise. But what it gives you in return is focus. Stillness gives you the space to filter out what's loud but empty, urgent but unimportant, tempting but misaligned. It teaches you to listen, not just to others, but to yourself, to your spirit, to what's true beneath the surface. In a noisy world, stillness becomes your superpower. You become immune to the pressure to perform, to the rush to respond, to the trap of reacting instead of responding with wisdom. Direction doesn't always come in a flash. Sometimes it's revealed piece by piece, layer by layer, in the quiet space between your thoughts. When you're still, you're not just waiting. You're receiving, you're positioning yourself to hear, you're aligning yourself with timing. And timing is everything. The right move at the wrong time can cost you everything. But stillness allows you to wait for alignment, not just what to do, but when to do it, not just what to say, but how to say it, not just where to go, but why you're going. That's what stillness unlocks clarity with context. Many miss their moment because they refuse to be still. They outrun their clarity. They act before they understand. They move before they're ready. But when you learn the discipline of stillness, you develop the ability to walk in sync with purpose. You learn to listen before you lead, to observe before you engage, to discern before you decide. This kind of clarity doesn't just change what you do. It changes how you live. You no longer react to life. You respond with intention. You no longer chase everything. You pursue only what matters. Stillness doesn't just bring clarity. It brings divine direction. In the quiet, God speaks, not always loudly, not always immediately, but faithfully. He leads not through the earthquake or the fire, but through the still, small voice. That voice that cuts through doubt, that silences fear, that confirms what your spirit already sensed but your mind couldn't articulate. That voice that tells you this is the way, walk in it, not with anxiety but with peace, not with striving but with confidence. Stillness makes space for that voice. Stillness invites divine direction. And in a world that's lost in motion, those who are still will always move with greater purpose. Self-control is shown by restraint, not reaction. In a world that teaches us to speak our minds at every opportunity, to clap back, to fight fire with fire, real power looks like choosing peace when you could choose chaos. It's easy to respond to offense with offense, to answer disrespect with anger, to lash out when someone crosses a line. But it takes maturity, discipline, and strength to hold yourself in check when everything in you wants to retaliate. That's what self-control really is, choosing not to be moved by every trigger, every insult, every test of your patience. It's the quiet strength that says, I'm bigger than this moment. When you're secure in who you are, you don't need to prove it every time you're challenged. You don't need to show up to every argument or justify every decision. You don't have to validate your worth with loudness or aggression. Restraint becomes your proof of power. When others are reacting, you're remaining. When they're escalating, you're preserving. Not because you're weak, but because you know what you carry is too valuable to waste on things that don't deserve your energy. Self-control means recognizing that your peace is more important than your pride, that your purpose is more important than your ego. There's something incredibly powerful about a person who can pause, who can sit with the emotion, acknowledge it, and still not let it take over. That pause is the difference between chaos and clarity. It's the space where you decide not to let your emotions control your actions. It's where you choose wisdom over impulse, grace over vengeance, silence over shouting. That pause is a sign of strength. It says, I have the right to respond, but I choose not to. I have the reason to be angry, but I choose peace. That's not weakness. That's control. That's leadership. Restraint doesn't mean you don't feel. It doesn't mean you're numb. It means you've learned how to manage what you feel so it doesn't manage you. It means your emotions serve you. You don't serve them. It means you understand timing, context, and consequences. You understand that not everything deserves your reaction, that sometimes the best response is no response, that silence, distance, or walking away is sometimes the most powerful move you can make, because your reaction gives access, and not everything or everyone deserves that access. When you practice restraint, you're protecting your future. You're choosing not to sabotage your destiny for a moment of satisfaction. You're choosing not to ruin relationships, opportunities, or your reputation because someone got under your skin. You're building a legacy of wisdom, not just moments of victory. Because in the end, people don't just remember what you said or did. They remember how you carried yourself. They remember if you brought peace or poured fuel on the fire. They remember if you were a thermostat or a thermometer. Did you set the temperature, or did you just reflect it? Self-control is more than a personal virtue. It's a spiritual discipline. It's the fruit of something deeper, something rooted in identity and faith. When you know you're called, when you know you're covered, you don't need to fight every battle. You can trust that not every injustice needs your retaliation. Some things are better handled by time, by truth, by God. You can walk away from slander, betrayal, or offense knowing that vindication doesn't always come from your voice. It often comes from your silence, from letting your integrity speak for itself, from letting your consistency be your response. There's wisdom in knowing which battles to fight and which ones to walk away from. There's power in knowing you don't have to respond to every critic, every rumor, every jab. When you react to everything, you become predictable, controllable, easily manipulated. But when you exercise restraint, you become focused, centered, untouchable. People can't throw you off course because you're not driven by emotion. You're grounded by purpose. You don't move because of pressure. You move because of clarity, and that kind of control is rare, but it's what separates those who lead from those who are led. The world may not always celebrate restraint. It might see it as weakness or call it passive, but deep down, people recognize the power in someone who chooses discipline over drama, who doesn't let their mouth ruin what their hands are building, who doesn't allow a moment of anger to destroy years of progress. That kind of restraint commands respect. It earns trust. It builds credibility, because people know that when you do speak, it means something. When you act, it's intentional. When you move, it's purpose-driven. That's self-control in action. Not loud, not flashy, but unshakably powerful. Discipline is not punishment, it is protection. In a world where gratification is immediate and desires are constantly indulged, discipline stands as the gatekeeper of purpose. It's the structure that keeps dreams from crumbling, the boundaries that shield potential from sabotage. Many people confuse discipline with restriction, thinking it holds them back or limits their freedom. But the truth is, without discipline, freedom becomes chaos. Without limits, even the greatest vision can spiral into distraction. Discipline doesn't confine, it refines. It sharpens your focus, aligns your steps, and protects your energy from being spent on things that don't matter. It's not a cage, it's a compass. When someone commits to discipline, they're not saying yes to suffering. They're saying yes to something greater. They're saying yes to purpose, to growth, to the version of themselves that doesn't settle. Discipline doesn't just create habits, it crafts identity. It trains the heart and mind to act based on values, not emotions. It teaches you to choose what you want most over what you want now. That gap, the distance between impulse and intention, is where greatness is forged. That's the space where character is built, where consistency is tested, and where transformation takes root. Discipline is a daily decision. It's not glamorous, it's not loud. It's quiet, often unnoticed, and deeply personal. It happens in the small choices, the early morning wake-ups, the extra hour of preparation, the refusal to take shortcuts, the willingness to delay applause. These choices may not be celebrated, but they accumulate. They build momentum. They compound over time until one day the fruit shows up publicly from seeds that were planted privately. That's what makes discipline powerful. It works even when no one is watching. It produces even when no one is clapping. It sustains what talent alone can never carry. In seasons of pressure, when everything feels uncertain, discipline is the anchor. It keeps you grounded when emotions try to sway you. It reminds you of your why when motivation disappears. Because motivation is temporary, but discipline is dependable. Motivation fades, but discipline stays. It's the routine that carries you through the valley, the habit that keeps your hands moving when your heart wants to give up. Discipline is what allows you to keep showing up, not because it feels good, but because it's right. Not because you're strong every day, but because you've committed to something greater than how you feel in a moment. Discipline is also about stewardship. It's about managing the gifts, time, and opportunities you've been given with intention. It's about recognizing that what you have isn't random. It's been entrusted to you, and how you handle that trust matters. Discipline takes that seriously. It says, if I've been given this dream, this responsibility, this calling, then I have to take care of it. Not casually. Not when it's convenient, but faithfully. Discipline honors the assignment. It treats the process with reverence. It understands that what is built without discipline won't last, but what is built with it will not only survive, it will thrive. People often admire the results of discipline without understanding the cost. They see the success, but not the sacrifice. They want the reward, but not the routine. But discipline doesn't apologize for the cost. It embraces it because the cost of discipline is always less than the cost of regret. The pain of staying consistent is far lighter than the weight of what could have been. That's why discipline isn't something you do once. It's something you become. It gets into your language, your habits, your relationships. It reshapes your appetite. You start craving growth more than comfort. You start choosing impact over indulgence. There will always be moments where giving up looks easier, where compromise seems quicker, where shortcuts call your name. But that's when discipline speaks up. That's when it reminds you that what you're building is too important to rush, that who you're becoming is too valuable to abandon. Discipline says no to distraction so it can say yes to destiny. It says no to what's urgent so it can focus on what's important. And in doing so, it protects your vision. It shields your purpose from erosion. It keeps you moving not at the speed of emotion, but at the pace of purpose. Real discipline isn't about rigid control, it's about radical alignment. It aligns your actions with your values, your habits with your vision, your today with your future. It creates space for growth by eliminating the noise that pulls you off track. It requires sacrifice, yes, but the kind of sacrifice that multiplies later. The kind of sacrifice that doesn't shrink you. It stretches you. That doesn't deplete. It develops. Discipline makes you stronger than your excuses, louder than your fears, and more committed than your comfort. It's not about perfection, but about progress rooted in intentionality. It's not about force, but about faithfulness to the process. So don't be afraid of silence. Embrace it. Let it teach you. Let it strengthen you. Let it lead you. While others chase applause, let silence anchor your soul. While others shout for attention, let silence deepen your focus. There's a stillness that speaks louder than thunder, and it's found in the heart that's anchored, steady, and quiet enough to hear the whisper of wisdom. Because when you learn the power of silence, you don't just find peace. You become it. Thank you.